So, when our daughter was born, she had the grave misfortune of being born second. From the get-go, she was clearly much more of a leader than a follower. It rankled her no end when her older brother got to do things that she did not get to do. So much so that she earned the nickname bestowed by my sister and their beloved Aunt Jeannie, Me Too. She would wail that anytime her brother was allowed anything that she was not. Like unreasonable things like staying up a little bit later at night because he was older, or skipping the afternoon nap because he didn't need it anymore, or riding a two-wheel bike, or any one of a number of things that he was ready for, but she was not. Or so we thought she was not. You see, when you're motivated to not be left behind, you get ready faster than your parents might expect you to. And let me tell you, there was very little peace in our house until she accomplished what she had set her sights upon. I think of her when I hear this gospel story. Most of us know that famous disciple by his nickname, Doubting Thomas. But if you actually listen to the text, Thomas never says, I don't believe or I won't believe. What he says is far more honest than that. He says, unless I see, unless I touch, I won't believe. In other words, me too. I want what the others had. I want to see for myself. Somewhere along the way, that honesty got turned into a flaw. And we've referred to him by that flaw ever since. But what if it's not? What if Thomas is not the symbol of doubt, but a symbol for courage? And what if the risen Christ meets not only the fearful disciples behind the doors, but also the ones that are still out in the world trying to live, still asking honest questions, still not in the loop? The scene in today's gospel begins in fear. The disciples are behind locked doors. They're afraid because everything they trusted has fallen apart. Jesus is dead, and they figure they're next. So they hide into a locked room, into that fear, into that silence. Jesus comes. He doesn't wait for them to calm down or get their acts together. He simply stands among them, and he says the most remarkable and most needed thing for that moment: peace be with you. Not as a greeting, but as a gift. Peace spoken directly into the fear. Peace spoken directly into the panic. Peace spoken into that locked room. But Thomas isn't there. That little detail, it matters. While the others are all locked away, afraid, Thomas is somewhere else. Out there somewhere. Still afraid, surely. Still grieving, absolutely. But not hidden, not paralyzed. We don't know what he was doing or where he was, but we do know what he was not doing. He was not hiding behind a locked door. And that alone changes how I see him. Thomas is not the disciple who fell away or who denied or who was too afraid to follow. He was the disciple who stayed engaged, who faced his fears, who spoke up. And that takes courage. We've called him the doubter, but earlier in John's gospel, Thomas is the one who says something far more brave than any other disciple pretty much ever did. When Jesus decides to go back toward danger, toward Judea, the others hesitate, and they try to talk him out of it. It's too risky. But Thomas is the one who speaks up and says, let us all go together that we may die with him there. That's not doubt. That's courage. That's loyalty that's counted the cost and still chooses to follow. Thomas's is not a fragile faith. Thomas's is a costly faith. Now, after the crucifixion, that same courage comes in a different form. He does not hide away. He does not go along with the crowd. When the others say, "We have seen the Lord," Thomas refuses to perform belief. He says, "I need to see for myself." That's not unbelief. That's integrity. A week passes, we return to that locked room. The disciples are there, the doors are still locked, but now Thomas is with them. And again, Jesus comes, and this is what Jesus does. He meets people where they are. He doesn't scold Thomas. He doesn't shame him for asking for evidence. He doesn't say, "You should have believed them." Instead, before anything else happens, before any wounds are shown, before any questions are answered, Jesus again says those remarkable and much-needed words, "Peace be with you." Because peace is not a one-time event. It is not fragile. It is not withdrawn when questions arise. It is spoken again into that same fear, into the same uncertainty, into the same community, still learning how to believe, still learning how to follow. Then Jesus turns to Thomas, not in anger, but with an invitation. Go ahead, put your hands here. Look at my hands, look at my wounds. No shame, no rejection, only presence, only peace. This is what courage actually looks like. Courage doesn't hide away. Courage asks the hard questions. Courage is showing up in the room even when your questions are not resolved. Courage is refusing to shut the door on faith just because you don't understand everything. Courage is being honest enough to say, "I need more," while still staying close enough to receive what Jesus gives. And what Jesus gives again and again in this gospel is not explanation, it's peace. The early church knew this same tension. Our first reading from 1 Peter speaks about it directly. I guess it was our second reading from 1 Peter. Describing a living hope born not out of certainty, but out of resurrection. Not out of control, but out of trust. Hope that lives in the middle of uncertainty, not after it all disappears. That is what Thomas is learning. That is what the disciples are learning. And guess what? That is what we are still learning so many years later. Hope is not the absence of questions. Hope is the presence of Christ right in the middle of them. And then Psalm 16 says, "You will not abandon me." That is the hidden truth under everything happening in this story. Whether Thomas is out in the world trying to live his life or the disciples are locked away in fear, God is not absent from either place. Not behind the locked door, nor outside of it, but present in both, holding both. So what does Thomas teach us? Maybe courage looks like continuing to live in faith even when it feels uncertain. Maybe courage looks like refusing to shut down when life feels fragile. Maybe courage looks like asking honest questions. Maybe courage looks like staying in relationship with Jesus even when belief is incomplete. Because faith is not the absence of struggle. Faith is the refusal to walk away from Jesus in the middle of that struggle. No wonder Jesus said what he did when he revisited that locked room. Fear is still there. Questions are still there. Thomas is still Thomas, and the disciples are still the disciples, and nothing about their situation is perfect or resolved. And yet Christ stands among them and says, "Peace be with you." Not because everything's fixed, but because he's there. And where he is, peace is not just a nice idea. Peace is a presence. Peace is a person. And peace brings courage. "Me too," we say, and Jesus answers us with "Peace be with you." And thanks be to God, that's all it takes. Amen.